Hi guys, and welcome to Bedtime History Relaxing. Tonight we step into a place that glitters in the distance, a place that promises more than it can ever truly give. You stand at the edge of California in 1850, dust still clinging to your boots, your body tired from weeks or months of travel, and yet your mind wide awake with possibility. The air feels different here, sharper somehow, filled with movement voices and the quiet hum of ambition. Somewhere ahead, hidden in riverbeds and hillsides, lies gold. And like so many others, you have come to find it. You take a slow breath and look around. Wagons creak past you. Men argue in accents from places you barely recognize, and the ground itself seems worn down by the sheer number of footsteps pressing forward. It is not peaceful. It is not orderly. It is alive in a restless, unsettled way. And here is the part no one really told you. You probably won't survive this, not in the way you imagine, not unchanged, not untouched by what this place demands. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you feel like it, share where you are in the world and what time it is for you right now. It is always strangely comforting to imagine this story drifting across different rooms, different nights, different lives. Now dim the lights and let yourself step fully into the story. You move forward with the crowd, though there is no real path, only a shared direction. California in 1850 is not yet settled in the way you might expect. It is still forming, still expanding, still figuring itself out. The gold rush began just a couple of years earlier, in 1848, when flakes of gold were first discovered at a sawmill along the American River. News travelled slowly at first, then all at once spreading across continents and oceans until it reached people like you. By 1850, hundreds of thousands have arrived or are on their way. Ships crowd the harbours. Trails stretch long and uncertain across deserts and mountains. You are one of many, and yet it feels personal, like this journey was meant specifically for you. Your clothes carry the story of how you got here. Dust from the plains, salt from ocean air, stains from nights spent sleeping on uneven ground. You may have come by wagon, by ship, or on foot for long stretches, but however you arrived, it was not easy. A widely accepted historical understanding tells us that the journey to California during the gold rush could take several months, depending on the route. Some crossed the continent through harsh terrain, while others sailed around Cape Horn or through Panama facing disease and storms along the way. However you made it, your body remembers. You pause for a moment, shifting your weight, feeling the quiet ache in your legs. There is a temptation to rest, but rest feels dangerous here. Not physically dangerous, not yet, but you sense that if you stop moving even briefly, you might fall behind. And falling behind is something no one here wants to do. Around you, conversations flicker in and out of your awareness. Someone claims to have seen a man pull a nugget the size of a walnut from a shallow stream. Another insists that the best land is already taken. A third swears that a new site farther north is richer than anything found so far. It is hard to tell what is true. A curious and lesser-known detail is that many of these stories were exaggerated or entirely invented, yet they spread quickly through camps and towns, fueling the rush even further. Hope, it turns out, is contagious. You feel it yourself. Even as doubt creeps in, even as your body protests, there is something about the idea of gold that pulls you forward. Not just the metal itself, but what it represents. A sudden change, a different life, an escape from whatever you left behind. You adjust your grip on the small bundle of belongings you carry. It is not much. A few tools perhaps, a blanket, some food if you were able to keep it. Everything else had to be left behind or traded away along the journey. There is no room here for excess. As you walk, the land begins to shift. The flatter ground gives way to rolling hills, then to rougher terrain cut through by streams and rivers. These waterways are what everyone talks about. This is where the gold is said to be caught in bends and trapped in gravel, waiting for someone patient or lucky enough to find it. You stop at the edge of one such river and look down. The water moves steadily, not fast, not slow, just enough to carry small things along its path. Sunlight touches the surface in scattered reflections, and for a moment you imagine you see something flash beneath. Your heart lifts slightly. Then you realize it is just light. Historians continue to debate how much easily accessible gold was truly available in these early years, or whether the richest deposits were quickly exhausted, leaving most miners to struggle for smaller and smaller returns. Standing here now, you begin to understand why that question matters. Because if the gold is not as plentiful as promised, then what exactly have you come for? You kneel down, reaching toward the water, letting it run over your fingers. It is colder than you expected. Not painfully cold, but enough to make you hesitate. Enough to remind you that this work, whatever it becomes, will not be comfortable. You watch the current for a while longer. Around you, others are already at work. Some crouch with shallow pans swirling water and sediment in practice motions. Others dig into the banks with shovels piling up earth in small mounds. A few stand back observing, as if trying to learn before committing themselves. No one looks entirely confident, and yet no one leaves. There is a strange silence beneath the noise. Not an absence of sound, but a kind of shared focus. Each person here is locked into their own quiet calculation. How much effort, how much time, how much hope they are willing to spend. You feel it settling into you as well. The realization that this is no longer a journey, this is your life now. You shift closer to the water, choosing a spot that is neither too crowded nor too isolated. It feels like a small decision, but you sense that small decisions will matter here. Where you stand, when you start, who you trust. You set down your things and take another slow breath. The air carries the scent of damp earth, wood smoke from distant fires, and something else you cannot quite name. Perhaps it is simply the smell of too many people gathered in one place, all chasing the same fragile dream. You glance once more at the river. Somewhere beneath that moving surface, you tell yourself there is gold. And as your fingers tighten slightly as your posture shifts from observer to participant, you begin to understand that whatever happens next will not be easy, not be quick, and not be gentle. But you step forward anyway. You do not linger long at the river's edge before the quiet pressure of movement returns. Standing still feels like losing ground, even if no one has said it out loud. Around you, men shift constantly, adjusting positions, watching one another, calculating where to place their effort next. You begin to understand that finding gold is not only about what lies beneath the surface, but about where you choose to stand and how quickly you claim it. So you move. You follow the curve of the river, stepping over loose stones and patches of damp soil, scanning for a place that feels right, though you are not entirely sure what that means yet. Some spots are already crowded, clusters of men working shoulder to shoulder, their movements repetitive and focused. Other stretches are quieter, but something about them seems less promising, as if the absence of people signals the absence of gold. You hesitate between the two. It is a strange calculation. Do you trust the crowd, assuming they have chosen well, or do you trust your own instinct, however uncertain it may be? A broadly accepted historical reality is that miners during the early gold rush could claim a section of land often referred to as a claim, but these claims were rarely formal in the beginning. There were no immediate official systems in place. Instead, local groups of miners developed their own rules, deciding how much land one person could work and how long they could hold it. You feel that lack of structure now. There are no clear boundaries marked with signs or fences, no official maps handed out. Instead, there are gestures, glances, and the occasional raised voice. A man points to a patch of gravel and declares it his. Another disputes it. Others nearby watch, not intervening unless the disagreement escalates. You slow your pace, observing carefully. A man not far from you has driven a simple wooden stake into the ground. Another has piled stones in a rough circle. These are their claims, fragile declarations that depend as much on social agreement as on physical markers. You swallow slightly. This is not the orderly system you might have imagined. This is something more fluid, more uncertain. A place where confidence can matter as much as evidence. You spot a narrow stretch along the riverbank that seems only lightly worked. A few scattered holes, some disturbed gravel, but no one actively digging. It is not the most promising location, at least not by appearances, but it is available. An availability you begin to realize is its own kind of opportunity. You step toward it, your boots sinking slightly into the damp ground. For a moment you pause, looking around to see if anyone objects. A couple of men glance in your direction, then look away. No one challenges you. So you begin. You gather a few stones and place them in a rough line, marking the edges of your chosen space. It feels almost symbolic, like drawing a boundary in sand, but it is enough. For now. A lesser known detail is that many miners relied on these informal markers, and disputes over claims were common. Some were settled through discussion, others through group votes, and occasionally through force, though most tried to avoid open conflict when possible. You straighten up and look at your small claim. It is not impressive, not wide, not particularly rich looking, but it is yours, at least for the moment. There is a quiet shift inside you as that realization settles. This patch of earth, this uneven stretch of gravel and mud is now tied to your effort, your hope, your time. Whatever you find here or fail to find will shape what comes next. You kneel down and run your fingers through the top layer of soil. It is coarse, mixed with small stones, damp, but not waterlogged. You try to imagine what lies beneath. Is there gold hidden here, trapped between heavier particles, waiting for someone patient enough to uncover it? Or has this place already been picked clean, leaving only the illusion of possibility? Historians still argue whether the early claims along these rivers were genuinely rich for most miners, or whether only a small number of individuals truly benefited while others chased diminishing returns. As you sit there, your hands brushing through the gravel, that question feels less academic and more immediate. Because you are here now, and this is your ground. You reach for your pan, the simple tool that will become an extension of your hands in the days ahead. It feels light, almost too light, considering what you expect it to do. But you have seen others use it. You have watched the motion. Scoop, submerge, swirl, and hope. You scoop your first pan of material, lifting it carefully. The weight surprises you slightly. Even a small amount of earth carries substance. You lower the pan into the water, letting it fill, then begin the slow circular motion you observed earlier. The water moves through the sediment, carrying lighter particles away while heavier ones settle. At least that is the idea. Your movements are not smooth yet. The rhythm feels awkward, your hands unsure of the right balance between patience and efficiency. Some of the gravel spills over the edge too quickly and you instinctively tighten your grip. Nearby someone laughs softly. Not cruelly, but knowingly. You glance up, catching the eye of an older miner. He gives a small nod as if to say that everyone starts this way. There is no instruction offered, no guidance spoken aloud, but the message is clear. You will learn, or you will leave. You return your focus to the pan, slowing your motion, trying to let the water do more of the work. Gradually, the larger stones shift aside, leaving finer material behind. Dark sand begins to collect at the bottom, dense and heavy. Your breath slows. This is the moment you have imagined. You tilt the pan slightly, letting a thin layer of water wash over the remaining sediment. You look closely, your eyes scanning for that unmistakable glint. For a second, you think you see it. A tiny flash. You lean closer, your heart lifting. But as the water clears, the flash fades. Just a trick of light on wet stone. You sit back, tightly exhaling. Not disappointment exactly, not yet. More like a quiet adjustment of expectation. This will take time. Around you, the rhythm of the river continues. Pans dipping, shovels scraping, voices rising and falling. Everyone engaged in the same repetitive act, each with their own small piece of land, each chasing the same uncertain reward. You dip your pan again and again. With each movement, your body begins to adapt. Your hands find a steadier rhythm. Your eyes grow more attentive to subtle differences in colour and weight. The work is slow, almost meditative, but beneath that calm surface lies a constant tension. Will this be the pan that changes everything, or just another handful of mud and stone? You glance at your rough boundary of rocks, you claim your place in this shifting landscape. It does not feel secure. It does not feel permanent. But it is enough for now. And as the sun moves slowly overhead, as your muscles begin to settle into the labour, you start to understand that staking a claim was only the beginning. Holding it, working it, surviving it, that is where the real challenge begins. You begin to notice as the hours stretch quietly onward that gold is only one part of this life. The rest is everything surrounding it. The small details, the overlooked necessities, the quiet discomforts that slowly grow into something larger if ignored. Your stomach reminds you first. It is not a sharp hunger not yet, but a steady emptiness that has been building since morning. You set your pan aside for a moment and reach into your bundle, pulling out what little food you have left. Perhaps a piece of bread already stiff, maybe some dried meat tough enough to make your jaw work harder than you would like. You take a bite. It's not satisfying, but it is enough to keep you going. A commonly accepted fact is that food in the goldfields was both scarce and expensive, especially in the early years of the rush. Basic items like eggs, flour, and coffee could cost several times what they would back east. Supply struggled to keep up with demand, and those who controlled goods often set prices as high as they pleased. You feel that reality with each bite. Every mouthful carries a quiet calculation. How much do you have left? How long will it last? When will you need to buy more? And more importantly, how will you afford it if the gold does not come? You glance toward the edge of the camp where a few makeshift tents and wooden structures have begun to gather. That is where supplies are sold. Coffee beans, tools, blankets, anything a miner might need, provided he is willing to pay. A curious detail that often surprises people is that a single egg could sell for what would seem like an unreasonable price at the time, sometimes at the equivalent of a full day's wage elsewhere. Fresh food was rare, and anything perishable became a luxury almost immediately. You chew slowly, letting that sink in. It is a strange thought that an egg could feel more valuable than a handful of glittering dust. You finish your small meal and brush your hands clean, though the dirt never fully leaves your skin. It settles into the lines of your fingers under your nails, becoming a part of you in a way that feels both temporary and permanent. You stand and stretch your back, tightening slightly before easing again. There is still much to do. As the day leans forward, you begin to think about where you will sleep. The idea has been quietly waiting in the background, but now it steps into focus. Night will come, and when it does, you will need shelter. You walk a short distance from your claim, scanning the area. Tents of all kinds dot the landscape. Some a little more than cloth draped over poles. Others are sturdier, patched together from canvas and wood, offering a bit more protection from wind and rain. You find a space not far from your claim and begin to set up what little you have. Your tent, if it can be called that, is simple. A piece of fabric stretched over a frame low to the ground, just enough room to lie down and keep some of the cold air off your body. You secure it as best you can, pressing stakes into the earth, adjusting the angles until it feels stable. It is not comfortable, but it is yours. A lesser discussed aspect of mining life is how quickly these camps grew, often without planning or infrastructure. Within weeks or even days, entire communities could form, filled with tents, shacks, and improvised shelters all crowded together in uneven arrangements. You see that now. There is no order to the layout. Paths form naturally where people walk most often. Fires burn in scattered clusters. Voices carry easily in the open air, blending into a constant background murmur. You gather a few pieces of wood and start a small fire. The act feels grounding. The crackle of burning wood, the faint warmth against your hands, the glow of light as the sun begins to lower. It gives shape to the space around you, turning a patch of land into something closer to a home, even if only for a night. You set a small pot near the fire if you have one and add water. Perhaps you have a bit of coffee. Perhaps not. If you do, it is weak, thin, more comfort than nourishment. You sip it anyway. Nearby other miners do the same. Some talk quietly, sharing stories of where they came from. Others sit in silence, staring into the flames as if trying to read something there. You listen without meaning to. Someone mentions New York. Another speaks of Chile. Another of China. The world has gathered here in a way that feels almost impossible. Different languages, different customs, all brought together by the same fragile hoop. And yet, despite the crowd, you feel a certain distance. You're surrounded, but not necessarily connected. Historians continue to examine whether this mixture of cultures led to meaningful exchange, or whether most groups remained separate, interacting only when necessary. As you sit there listening to voices you do not fully understand, it feels like both might be true. You lie back for a moment, looking up at the sky. It's clearer than you expected. Away from cities, away from lamps and smoke, the stars appear sharp and numerous, stretching across the darkness in quiet patterns. For a brief moment, the tension of the day softens. You breathe in slowly, then the sounds return. A cough from somewhere nearby, laughter from another fire, the shifting of bodies settling into sleep. The occasional sharp note of disagreement that fades just as quickly as it rises. Sleep here will not be easy. You return to your small shelter and lie down, pulling your blanket over you. It is thin, not quite enough to keep out the chill, but you make do. Your body is tired enough that comfort becomes secondary. You close your eyes, but your mind does not settle immediately. It drifts back to the river, to the pan in your hands, to that brief flash you thought you saw. You replay the motion again and again, wondering if you missed something, if you moved too quickly, if the gold was there and slipped away. Then your thoughts shift to tomorrow. You will wake early, you will return to the same spot, you will try again, because that is what everyone here does, day after day. Hope, effort, uncertainty. You turn slightly, adjusting to a more comfortable position, listening to the steady rhythm of the camp around you. The fire outside has burned lower, its light fading into soft ember, and slowly, almost without noticing, your thoughts begin to quiet. The hunger, the cost, the roughness of your shelter, all of it settles into the background. Not gone, but softened by exhaustion. Tomorrow will bring more of the same. More work, more waiting, more wondering. But for now, in this brief moment between effort and sleep, you let yourself rest. Morning arrives quietly, though not gently. The cold reaches you first, slipping through your blanket and pressing against your skin with a steady insistence. You open your eyes, slowly aware of the stiffness in your back and shoulders before you even move. For a moment you lie still, listening. The camp is already waking. Soft footsteps on dirt. The faint clatter of metal tools. Someone coughing nearby. The low murmur of voices beginning another day before the sun has fully risen. There is no sense of lingering here, no indulgence in comfort. The rhythm of this place pulls everyone forward whether they are ready or not. You sit up, pulling your blanket tighter around your shoulders for a moment before setting it aside. The air feels sharper in the early light, carrying the scent of damp earth and last night's fire, now reduced to ash and faint warmth. Your stomach reminds you again. You reach for what little food remains and take a careful portion. There is no luxury in this act, only necessity. Each bite is measured, each sip of water considered. You have already begun to think not in terms of meals, but in terms of survival. It becomes clear quite quickly that supplies in the goldfields do not behave like supplies anywhere else. Prices are unpredictable, often inflated beyond reason, and entirely dependent on what traders can bring in and what miners are willing to pay. A sack of flour, a strip of bacon, even a simple cup of coffee can cost more than you would expect back home. You chew slowly, letting that reality settle in again. Gold may be the goal, but food is the immediate concern. A small, almost absurd detail drifts into your thoughts, something you overheard the night before. Someone claimed that fresh milk, when it could be found at all, was treated almost like a delicacy, traded carefully and consumed quickly before it spoiled. In a place built on dreams of wealth, something as simple as milk becomes rare and precious. You finish eating and stand stretching your arms overhead. Your muscles protest at first, then ease slightly as you begin to move. The body adjusts. You are starting to learn, not because it wants to, but because it must. You make your way back to the river. The light has changed. The surface of the water now reflects the pale glow of morning, softer than the harsh brightness of midday. It looks calm, almost inviting, though you know better now. Beneath that surface lies cold that seeps into your bones and work that demands patience. You step into position at your claim, glancing briefly at the rough line of stones you placed yesterday. They are still there. No one has disturbed them. That at least is something. You kneel down and pick up your pan. The motion feels slightly more familiar today. Not comfortable, not effortless, but less foreign. You scoop a portion of gravel and lower it into the water, letting it fill before beginning the slow circular movement. This time you're more careful. You allow the water to carry away the lighter sediment, resisting the urge to rush. Your hands settle into a rhythm guided by observation and small corrections rather than guesswork alone. The river is cold, It creeps into your fingers first, then your wrists, a steady chill that does not shock but lingers. After a while you begin to lose some sensation, not entirely, but enough to make fine movements slightly harder. You continue anyway. Many accounts from the time describe how miners spent long hours standing or crouching in icy streams, particularly in the early stages of placer mining. The work was repetitive and physically demanding, often leading to sore joints, numb hands, and a constant ache that became part of daily life. You begin to understand that not as a distant description, but as something immediate. Your back tightens as you lean forward, your knees press into uneven ground. Your fingers adjust to the shifting weight of sediment and water. Each movement is small, but repeated again and again they build into something heavier. You tilt the pan slightly, letting the water wash over the remaining material. Your eyes focus. This time there is no flash, no illusion, just dark sand and small stones settling at the bottom. You exhale quietly. Not disappointment, not quite, more like acceptance. You empty the pan and begin again. Around you others move in similar patterns. Some work quickly, their motions confident and practiced. Others, like you, move more cautiously, learning through repetition. There is a shared silence in the work, broken only occasionally by brief exchanges or the scrape of a shovel against rock. Time begins to blur. The sun rises higher, the light growing stronger, casting sharper reflections across the water. Your shadow shifts slowly beside you, marking the passage of hours in a way that feels almost detached from your awareness. At some point you pause, not because you want to, but because your body insists. You sit back, flexing your fingers, trying to bring warmth back into them. The sensation returns slowly, a mix of tingling and a dull ache. You rub your hands together, watching the river flow past, as if it has all the time in the world, and perhaps it does. There is a quiet thought that surfaces then. This river was here before you arrived. It will be here long after you leave. Whether you find gold or not does not change its course, its rhythm, its quiet persistence. You dip your hands back into the water and resume your work. Because your time, unlike the rivers, feels limited, a point that researchers continue to examine is how much gold an average miner could realistically expect to find in a single day. While stories of large discoveries were common, most miners earned only modest amounts, often barely enough to cover the cost of supplies. As you work, that idea begins to feel less like a statistic and more like a warning. You focus on the pan again, scoop, submerge, swirl. Each motion becomes part of a pattern, a steady repetition that occupies both your body and your mind. There is something almost hypnotic about it, the way the water moves, the way the sediment shifts, the way your attention narrows to the smallest details. For a moment you forget everything else. Then a voice nearby breaks the rhythm. A man calls out softly, not shouting, just enough to draw attention. You glance over. He's crouched low, his pan tilted careful, his posture suddenly tense. You watch. He leans closer, his eyes fixed on something at the bottom of his pan. There is a pause, a held breath, a moment where possibility hangs in the air. Then he nods to himself. It is not a grand reaction, not a shout or a cheer, just a quiet acknowledgement that he has found something worth keeping. You feel a small shift inside you. Not envy exactly, but something close to it. A reminder that the gold is real, that it can be found, that the effort is not entirely in vain. You return your attention to your own pan. Your movements are steadier now, more deliberate. You tilt the pan once more, letting the last layer of water slide across the sediment. And for a brief second, just at the edge of your vision, you think you see something. A faint warm glint. You lean closer, your breath slowing, your focus sharpening. But as the water clears, the glint resolves into something else. A piece of mica, perhaps, or just another trick of light on a wet surface. You sit back slightly. This is how it will be, you realize. Moments of hope, moments of doubt, small shifts between the two repeated over and over again. You glance once more at your claim, your small stretch of riverbank, your place in this vast, uncertain landscape. And then, without hesitation, you dip the pan again, because stopping is not really an option. The rhythm of your work settles into you more deeply now, not as something you consciously think about, but as something your body begins to follow on its own. Scoop, submerge, swirl, lift, watch, empty, repeat. It becomes a quiet cycle, one that fills the space between your thoughts and keeps doubt from growing too loud. But the stillness does not last. A voice cuts through the air, sharper than the usual low murmur of the riverbank. You look up instinctively. Two men stand a short distance away, their posture tense, their gestures quick and pointed. At first, it is difficult to tell what the disagreement is about. Then you notice the ground between them. A patch of gravel, a space not unlike your own. You watch as one man steps forward, his tone rising, insisting that the area belongs to him. The other shakes his head, replying just as firmly. There are no documents exchanged, no official lines to reference. Only memory, assumption, and the presence of witnesses. You begin to understand something important. Nothing here is as fixed as it seems. A commonly recognized aspect of early gold rush life is that formal law was largely absent in the mining regions during the first years. In its place, miners created their own systems of rules, often referred to as mining codes, which varied from one camp to another. These codes determined how claims were established, how long they could be held, and what counted as abandonment. You glance back at your own claim, your simple line of stones. It feels suddenly fragile. Nearby, a few other miners gather around the arguing men, not out of curiosity alone, but because their presence matters. Decisions here are often shaped by the group, by whoever happens to be nearby and willing to weigh in. The voices rise and fall, then settle into something quieter. One of the onlookers speaks, gesturing between the two men, suggesting a compromise. You cannot hear every word, but the tone shifts. The sharp edges soften slightly. Eventually one man steps back, not entirely satisfied, but willing to accept the outcome. The other nods once firmly, as if sealing the agreement. And just like that, the matter is settled. No paperwork, no official authority, just a moment of tension resolved through collective judgment. You return your gaze to the river, but the scene lingers in your mind, because it could just as easily have involved you. A small, almost ironic detail from this period is that some camps held regular meetings where miners would vote on rules and settle disputes, creating a kind of temporary democracy in places that otherwise lacked structure. These meetings could be orderly or chaotic, depending on who was present and what was at stake. You imagine standing in one of those gatherings, raising your hand, arguing your case, relying on strangers to decide your future. It's not a comforting thought. You dip your pan again, though. Your focus is slightly different now. You're no longer just watching the sediment. You are watching the people around you as well. Who works quietly, who watches others, who steps in when conflict arises. You begin to map the social landscape as carefully as the physical one. There is a man upstream who rarely speaks, but whose movements are precise and efficient. Another nearby who talks, often offering advice whether it is asked for or not. A pair of miners who seem to work together, sharing tools and space, their coordination suggesting familiarity. And then there are those who keep to themselves and themselves entirely. You wonder which approach is best, to blend in to build connections, or to remain separate and avoid entanglement. Writers who study this era often point out that success in the goldfields was not only about finding gold, but also about navigating these informal social systems. Knowing when to cooperate, when to assert yourself, and when to step back could make as much difference as any strike of luck. You feel that truth settling into place. This is not just labour. It is negotiation, observation, and quiet strategy. You pause again, stretching your back, letting your gaze drift across the river. The light has shifted once more, the sun now higher, the reflections sharper. The water moves as it always has, indifferent to the tensions along its edge. You lower your pan and continue. Scoop, submerge, swirl. Your hands move almost automatically now. Your attention split between the process and the world around you. You listen without appearing to listen, picking up fragments of conversation carried on the breeze. Someone mentions a new discovery farther up the river. Another dismisses it as rumour. A third insists that a nearby claim has already been abandoned and is free for the taking. Information flows here like the water itself, sometimes clear, often muddied, always moving. You wonder how much of it to trust. You tilt your pan, letting the water wash away the lighter sediment. Your eyes scan the remaining material, searching for that subtle difference, that hint of something heavier, something worth keeping. Nothing. You empty the pan and begin again. The repetition continues steady and unbroken, yet beneath it something has shifted. You are more aware now of how easily things can change. A claim disputed, a rule reinterpreted, a rumour spreading just quickly enough to alter decisions before it can be verified. This place is not stable. It only appears that way from a distance. You take a slow breath and let it out, feeling the tension ease slightly from your shoulders. There is no point in trying to control everything, too many variables, too many unknowns. All you can do is work your claim, watch your surroundings and adapt as needed. You glance once more at the line of stones marking your space. They are still in place. For now, that is enough. You return to the rhythm, letting the motion of the pan guide you back into focus. The water flows, the sediment shifts. The small, quiet world within your hands becomes the centre of your attention once more. And as the day stretches onward, as the conversations rise and fall around you, you begin to understand that the rules here are not written in any permanent sense. They are shaped moment by moment, by people, by circumstance, by the fragile balance between order and uncertainty. You dip the pan, again steady and patient, because in a place like this, the only constant you can rely on is the work itself. By the time the sun begins its slow descent, you realise that the noise of the camp has changed. It is no longer the scattered, uncertain sound of arrival and adjustment. It has become something steadier, more layered, like a constant current running beneath everything. You notice it more clearly now that you're no longer new to it. Voices overlap in dozens of accents. English in many forms, mixed with Spanish, Cantonese, French, German, and others you cannot easily place. Some conversations are lively, filled with laughter or argument. Others are quiet, almost whispered, as if the speakers are trying to hold something close and private in a place where privacy barely exists. You sit near your small fire again, your body carrying the weight of the day's work. The ache in your back feels familiar, now no longer surprising, just present. You rub your hands together, still slightly stiff from the cold water, and look around at the people who share this space with you. There are so many of them, men of different ages, different backgrounds, different reasons for being here. Some look confident, their posture relaxed, as if they have already found a rhythm that suits them. Others appear uncertain, their movements hesitant, their eyes scanning the camp as if searching for something they cannot quite name. You realise that you are somewhere in between. One well-established observation about the gold rush is that it brought together people from across the world in a way that was unusual for the time. California became a kind of crossroads where cultures met not through planned exchange but through shared ambition and circumstance. You see that clearly now. A man across the fire stirs a pot, the smell of something unfamiliar drifting toward you. Another nearby sharpens a tool with slow, deliberate strokes. A small group speaks in a language you do not understand, their expressions animated, their gestures precise. And yet despite this closeness there is a distance that remains. You nod to a man as he passes and he nods back. It is a simple acknowledgement, nothing more, but it carries a quiet understanding. You're both here for the same reason, that's enough. Or perhaps it has to be. An interesting and often overlooked detail is that many miners form temporary partnerships sharing claims or dividing labour. But these arrangements were frequently short-lived. Trust was valuable but difficult to maintain in an environment where success could change a person's situation overnight. You consider that as you watch two men nearby working together, passing tools back and forth, their movements coordinated. It looks efficient, it looks easier than working alone, but you also wonder how long it will last. You shift your position slightly, pulling your blanket closer around your shoulders as the evening air cools. The fire flickers, casting soft light across faces that are both familiar and unknown. Someone begins to tell a story. You do not catch the beginning, but you listen as it unfolds. It is about a man who supposedly found a large nugget just upstream enough to change his life in a single day. The details are vivid, perhaps too vivid, but the listeners lean in anyway, drawn by the possibility. Stories like this move through the camp easily. They offer something beyond the daily grind. A reminder that success is possible even if it feels distant. Researchers who study this period often note that storytelling played a significant role in maintaining morale among miners. Whether true or exaggerated, these accounts helped sustain hope in an environment where results were often uncertain. You feel that affect yourself. As the story continues, you find your attention drawn not to the specifics, but to the feeling it creates. The idea that somewhere not too far from where you sit, something extraordinary could happen. You glance toward the river, now darkened by the fading light. It looks different at night, less inviting, more mysterious. The surface reflects only faint traces of the sky, and the movement of the water becomes harder to follow. It is still there, still flowing, but less visible, as if it has retreated into itself. You turn back to the fire. The warmth is welcome now more than it was earlier. You hold your hands closer, feeling the heat spread slowly through your fingers. Around you, the camp settles into its evening rhythm. Some continue to talk. Others prepare for sleep. A few remain at work, unwilling to give up the last light of the day. You listen to the sounds, the crackle of wood, the low hum of conversation, the occasional burst of laughter. It is not quiet, not in the way you might expect a remote place to be, but there is a kind of steadiness to it, a shared presence. You lie back again, your eyes drifting upward. The stars are beginning to appear. They seem brighter tonight, or perhaps you're simply noticing them more. Without the distractions of a city, the sky opens in a way that feels both vast and close at the same time. Each point of light steady, distant, unchanged by the activity below. You breathe in slowly. For a moment, the tension of the day eases. Then a thought returns. Even here, surrounded by so many others, you are still responsible for yourself, your claim, your supplies, your safety. No one else will manage those things for you. This is a place of shared space, but not shared responsibility. Historians continue to examine whether the sense of community in mining camps was strong or fragile, and the answer often seems to be both. Cooperation existed, but so did competition. Support could be offered, but it was rarely guaranteed. You feel that balance now. A man nearby offers another a cup of something warm. Another keeps his belongings, closes eyes, watchful, even as he sits by the fire. Both behaviours make sense here. You close your eyes briefly, then open them again. Sleep will come, but not immediately. Your mind drifts between the present moment and the day ahead. The work, the river, the steady repetition that defines your time here. You shift slightly, adjusting your position, listening as the camp gradually quiets. One voice fades, then another. The fire burns lower its light, softening. You are not alone, but you are not entirely connected either, and somewhere in that space between you find your place for the night. The next morning does not feel just like a continuation. Your body wakes before your thoughts fully return, already aware of what is expected. The stiffness in your shoulders greets you first, followed by the dull weight in your legs. You sit up slowly, noticing how quickly discomfort has become familiar, almost routine. The camp is quieter at this hour, though not silent. A few early risers move about with purpose, preparing for another long day. Others remain still beneath their blankets, holding on to what little rest they can before the work begins again. You take a moment to breathe. The air is cool, carrying a faint trace of moisture from the river. It feels clean, almost refreshing, but you know that sensation will not last. Soon the day will warm, the dust will rise, and the cycle will repeat. You gather your things and make your way back to your claim. The river looks much as it did yesterday, steady and unchanged. It gives no sign of what it holds beneath its surface, no hint of whether today will be different from the last. You kneel down and begin. Scoop, submerge, swirl. The rhythm returns quickly, settling into your hands with less resistance than before. Your movements are smoother now, your timing more controlled. You begin to notice small details that escaped you earlier. The way heavier material settles more quickly. The subtle difference in colour between ordinary sand and something denser. It is not mastery, but it is progress. Accounts from the time consistently describe how placer mining demanded long hours of repetitive labour, often with very modest results. Many miners spent entire days working through gravel, only to recover small amounts of gold, sometimes barely enough to justify the effort. You feel that reality building slowly around you. Each pan takes time, each motion requires attention, and the results, when they come at all, are small. Flecks, perhaps, tiny fragments that catch the light for a moment before settling back into stillness. You tilt the pan and look closely. There it is. Not much. Just a few faint specks barely larger than grains of sand. But they are different. Heavier. Warmer in colour. They do not wash away as easily as the rest. You hold your breath for a moment. This is it. Your first real sign. You shift the pan carefully, making sure not to lose what little you have found. It is not enough to change your life. Not enough to even cover much of your expenses, but it is something, and something matters. You sit back slightly, letting that small success settle into your awareness. Around you the work continues. Others are finding their own small amounts or nothing at all. The river does not favour one person over another in any obvious way. It gives what it gives. A lesser-known observation from this period is that experienced miners often developed a keen sense for where gold might accumulate, learning to read the flow of water and the shape of the riverbed. For those just starting out, however, it was often a matter of trial and error. You consider that as you look at your claim. Is this the right place? You study the curve of the river, the way the current slows slightly near your position. You remember hearing that gold, being heavier, tends to settle in areas where the water loses speed. Behind rocks, in bends, in small depressions. You shift slightly, adjusting your position by a few inches. It feels like a minor change, but here minor changes can matter. You dig a little deeper this time, pushing past the top layer of gravel into darker, more compact material below. It takes more effort. Your arms strain slightly as you lift the heavier load into your pan. You lower it into the water and begin again. The process is slower now, the material denser. You take your time letting the water carry away the lighter sediment in stages rather than all at once. Your focus narrows, the sounds of the camp fade into the background. The movement of others becomes less noticeable. For a while it is just you, the pan, and the quiet motion of water. You tilt the pan again. More dark sand remains this time, heavier, more concentrated. Your eyes scan carefully, and again there it is. A few more specks, slightly more than before. You feel a small shift inside you, a quiet lift. Not excitement exactly, but a gentle confirmation that your effort is not entirely misplaced. At the same time, a different realization begins to form. This is slow, painfully slow. Each gain is measured in fragments, in moments of careful observation. There is no sudden rush, no dramatic discovery. Just a steady accumulation that may or may not lead anywhere meaningful. Writers examining personal diaries from miners often note how many expressed frustration with the pace of their progress, describing days of hard labour that yielded only minimal results. As you continue working, that sentiment feels increasingly familiar. You empty the pan and begin again. Scoop, submerge, swirl. The repetition continues. Your back begins to ache again, more noticeably now. Your knees press into the ground, shifting slightly to relieve the pressure. Your hands move with practiced motion, but the effort remains. You pause briefly, straightening up and stretching. The river continues to flow, unchanged, unhurried. You glance at the other miners. Some appear to be doing better than you. Their movements quicker, their expressions more focused. Others seem to struggle, their motions uncertain, their posture weary. It's difficult to tell who will succeed. Perhaps no one truly knows. You kneel down again and return to your work, because stopping would mean giving up. And giving up, at least for now, is not something you're ready to do. You dip the pan once more, letting the water fill, letting the sediment settle, letting the slow process continue. The day stretches ahead of you, long, repetitive, uncertain, and yet with each small glint of gold, no matter how faint, you find just enough reason to keep going. As the day deepens, the rhythm you have settled into begins to reveal its hidden edge. What felt almost steady, almost manageable, starts to show the strain beneath it. Not all at once, but gradually, in small reminders that this place does not forgive carelessness. You shift your footing near the water, adjusting your balance as you reach for another scoop of gravel. The ground beneath you is uneven, softened by constant use, and as your weight shifts, your boot slips slightly. It is a small movement, barely noticeable, but enough to make your heart react. You catch yourself quickly planting your other foot more firmly, steadying your body before anything worse can happen. For a moment, you remain still aware of how easily that could have gone differently. The river looks calm, it always does, but beneath that calm surface the current moves with quiet strength. Not enough to sweep you away outright perhaps, but enough to pull to unsettle, to turn a small mistake into something more serious if you're not paying attention. Records from the time consistently describe accidents along riverbanks as common occurrences. Slips, falls, and injuries happened frequently, especially when miners worked long hours in wet conditions, their footing uncertain and their bodies already fatigued. You feel that truth settle into your awareness. This work demands attention, not just to the pan, not just to the possibility of gold, but to everything around you. You take a step back from the edge, choosing a slightly more stable position. It costs you a bit of convenience, but you sense that the trade is worth it. A little distance for a little safety. You kneel again and continue. Scoop, submerge, swirl. Your hands move, but your awareness has widened. You notice the angle of the bank, the placement of rocks, the way water curls around obstacles before continuing downstream. Every detail feels more important now. A sudden sound breaks your focus. A dull crack followed by a shifting noise that seems to come from just upstream. You look up. A section of the riverbank has given way. It is not dramatic. Not a landslide, not a roar. Just a portion of earth collapsing inwards, sliding into the water with a heavy splash. A man who'd been working nearby stumbles back, caught off guard. His footing lost for a moment before he regains it. Others don't be here. Tell me. I've turned to look. There is a brief pause, a shared recognition of what has just happened. Then slowly the activity resumes, as if nothing has changed. A smaller detail that often escapes attention is how unstable these riverbanks could be, especially after repeated digging and disturbance. The very act of mining weakened the ground, making collapses more likely over time. You glance at your own position again. The edge does not look as solid as it did before. You shift slightly farther back. The inconvenience feels minor compared to the risk. You return to your pan, but the moment lingers. A quiet reminder that this place is not static. It changes with each shovel, each movement of earth, each passing hour. You continue working your motion steady, but your attention divided. Then another sound reaches you, this one sharper. A shout. You turn again, this time toward a cluster of miners a short distance away. One of them is sitting down abruptly, his hand gripping his leg. Another kneels beside him, speaking quickly, though you cannot make out the words. The tension is immediate. Not panic, not chaos, but a focused concern. You watch as they examine the injury. It does not appear catastrophic, but serious enough to stop the man from continuing. A tool lies nearby, its edge catching the light. You look away after a moment, giving them space. Injuries like this were not unusual. Tools were simple, often heavy, and used repeatedly without much rest. Combined with fatigue and uneven ground, mistakes happened, and mistakes had consequences. You dip your pan again, though your movements are slightly slower now. More careful. You begin to notice how often you have been ignoring small signs. The way your back tightens before you shift position. The way your grip weakens slightly when your hands grow too cold. The way your focus drifts when you repeat the same motion too many times without pause. Each of these is small, but together they add up. You take a moment to rest. Not long, just enough to stand, stretch, and let your body reset. You roll your shoulders, flex your fingers, shift your weight from one foot to the other. The river continues, unchanged. You look out across it, watching the light play on its surface. For a brief moment it seems almost peaceful again. But you know better now. This place holds a quiet kind of danger. Not loud, not dramatic, but constant. It exists in the details, in the small missteps, in the moments when attention slips. A topic that researchers continue to examine is how many injuries and fatalities went unrecorded during the early gold rush years. With limited formal oversight and scattered settlements, many incidents were simply noted informally or not at all. You imagine how easily a story could disappear here. A man works, a man is injured, a man leaves or does not, and the river continues. You kneel again and return to your work. Scoop, submerge, swirl. The motion is familiar, but your awareness remains heightened. You adjust your stance more frequently now, choosing stability over speed. You keep a closer eye on the bank, on the water, on the people around you. You tilt the pan and look. Nothing this time. You empty it and begin again. The repetition continues, but it feels different now. Not just effort, but vigilance. Not just hope, but caution. You glance once more at the place where the bank collapsed earlier. It looks almost the same as before. Almost. And that is what makes it unsettling. Because change here does not always announce itself. Sometimes it happens quietly. You dip the pan again, steady and deliberate. Because in a place where even the ground beneath you can shift, the smallest awareness can make the difference between a close call and something more serious. And you are beginning to understand that surviving here is not just about finding gold. It is about noticing what others might miss. By the time the sun leans toward afternoon, your pace has slowed in a way that feels almost inevitable. Not because you want to stop, but because your body begins to set its own limits. The steady repetition, the cold water, the constant attention, it all gathers quietly beneath the surface until you feel it in every movement. You sit back for a moment, resting your hands on your knees, letting your breathing settle. And as you look around, something begins to stand out more clearly than it did before. Not everyone here is working the river. Your gaze drifts toward the edge of the camp where a different kind of activity unfolds. Small structures, some made of canvas, others of rough wood, stand in loose clusters. People move in and out of them with a sense of purpose that feels different from the repetitive labor at the water's edge. You watch as a man steps out of one of these tents carrying a tray of food. Another counts coins carefully, his posture relaxed in a way that contrasts sharply with the hunched figures along the river. A third leans against a post speaking with two miners who appear to be negotiating something. It becomes clear. There is more than one way to seek gold here. A widely recognized pattern of the gold rush era is that many of the most reliable profits were made not by miners but by those who supplied them. Merchants, traders and service providers often earned steady income by selling goods and services at high prices to miners who were desperate for necessities. You feel that realization settle into you. While you spend hours crouched in cold water for a few small flecks, others stand on dry ground, exchanging goods for coin, their success tied not to luck but to demand. You glance back at your hands, roughened already, slightly numb from the water, carrying traces of mud that never fully wash away. Then you look again toward the tents. Dry hands, clean clothes at least by comparison, movements that seem less strained, less urgent. It is a quiet contrast but a powerful one. A lesser-known anecdote often shared from this time is that simple items like shovels, boots, and even basic meals could be sold at prices far above their usual value, sometimes bringing in more profit in a single day than a miner might find in weeks. You consider that as you watch a man hand over coins for a small sack of supplies. There is no glitter in that transaction, no flash of gold, and yet it may be more valuable. You shift slightly, feeling the weight of your decision. You came here to mine. That was the plan. That was the dream. But now, standing between the river and the camp, you begin to see the shape of another possibility. One that does not involve ours in freezing water or the uncertainty of each pan. You shake the thought away, at least for now, because changing course feels too soon, too uncertain in its own way. You return your attention to the river. Scoop, submerge, swirl. The rhythm continues, though your mind is less settled within it. Each movement feels slightly more deliberate, as if you are measuring not just the sediment, but the value of your time. You tilt the pan. A few faint specks appear again. Small, familiar, not enough. You empty the pan and begin again. But the image of the camp remains in your thoughts. The steady exchange of goods. The quiet certainty of those transactions compared to the fragile hope of mining. You glance up as someone approaches. It is a man you have seen before, though you have not spoken. He carries a small sack over his shoulder and pauses a short distance away, watching the river with a thoughtful expression. You finding anything? He asks, his tone neutral. You consider the question. Some, you reply, not much. He nods as if that is exactly what he expected to hear. That's how it goes, he says, adjusting the sack slightly. Sometimes you get lucky, most times you don't. There is no bitterness in his voice, just a simple statement. You look at the sack he carries. Supplies, you ask. He glances down, then back at you. Selling, he says, coffee mostly, bit of flour, whatever I can get. You nod slowly. How is it, you ask? He gives a small shrug. Better than digging all day, he says. At least I know what I'll get at the end of it. You let that settle. It is not a boast, not a persuasion, just another perspective offered casually. He shifts his weight, then looks back toward the camp. Anyway, he adds good luck. You nod again. You too. He turns and walks away, his pace unhurried. You watch him go. There is something about that brief exchange that lingers. Not because it changes your situation immediately, but because it adds another layer to your understanding of this place. Gold is not just in the river. It is in the movement of goods, in the needs of others, in the structure that forms around the search itself. Writers who explore the economic side of the gold rush often emphasize how quickly these informal markets developed, turning mining camps into bustling centers of trade almost overnight. The demand created its own opportunities separate from the act of mining. You dip your pan again. Scoop, submerge, swirl. The motion continues steady as ever. But now each movement carries a question. Is this the best use of your effort? You tilt the pan. Another few specks. You stare at them for a moment, their small brightness contrasting with the darker sand around them. They are real. They matter. But are they enough? You empty the pan and sit back, resting your hands on your knees once more. The river flows. The camp hums. And somewhere between the two you begin to understand that the dream you followed here has more than one path. Not all of them lead through water. By evening the strain settles into you in a different way. Not just in your muscles or your hands, but deeper, quieter in the steady awareness that your body is not quite keeping up with what this place asks of it. You return to your small camp with slower steps, your boots carrying more than just dirt now. They carry fatigue, the kind that does not fade quickly with rest, but lingers building day after day. The fire from the night before has been reduced to pale ash. You crouch down and stir it gently, adding a few small pieces of wood until a faint glow returns. The warmth rises slowly, almost reluctantly, as if even the fire must be convinced to continue. You sit close to it. Your stomach reminds you again. You reach into your supplies, counting without fully meaning to. What remains is not much. A little flour, perhaps, some beans, maybe a small piece of meat if you have been careful. You prepare what you can, though the process feels less like cooking and more like assembling something barely sufficient. Boiled beans, dry bread, coffee if you are fortunate. There is little flavour here, little variety, just sustenance. A detail frequently mentioned in personal accounts from miners is how poor and repetitive their diet could become. Many relied on basic staples for long periods, leading not only to boredom but to declining health over time. You take a bite. It's filling enough, but not satisfying. Nearby, someone coughs sharply. Another voice complains quietly about a stomach problem that has not improved for days. You listen without looking aware that these are not isolated issues. This place wears people down in small, persistent ways. An odd and somewhat unsettling observation from the time is that poor sanitation in mining camps often led to the spread of illness. With limited access to clean water for drinking and washing, combined with crowded conditions, sickness could move quickly through a group. You glance at the river visible in the fading light. It provides water for everything. Drinking, washing, mining. You wonder briefly how clean it truly is. You return your attention to your meal, finishing it slowly, aware that each portion matters. There is no certainty about when you will next be able to restock or what it will cost when you do. You wipe your hands on a cloth, though the sense of dirt never fully leaves. It is in the air, in the ground, in everything you touch. Even in your thoughts, you lean back slightly, resting your weight on your hands and let your gaze drift across the camp. The evening is settling in. Fires flicker to life, one by one, small points of light against the growing darkness. Shadows move between them, figures passing, pausing, sitting. The sounds shift again from the steady labour of the day to the quieter, more fragmented rhythm of night. A man nearby unwraps his foot, examining it carefully in the firelight. You catch a glimpse of swollen skin, irritated from constant moisture and pressure. He sighs softly and begins to rewrap it, his movements practised but weary. You look down at your own boots. They feel heavier now than they did this morning. Damp in places, stiff in others. You consider removing them, letting your feet rest, but hesitate. The ground is cold and you're not entirely sure what lies beneath the surface around you. Another small calculation, comfort or caution. You keep them on. Medical descriptions from the period often note that miners frequently suffered from foot problems due to long hours in wet conditions, including infections that could become serious if left untreated. You shift your weight again, trying to ease the pressure. The fire crackles softly. Someone begins to speak again, telling another story, though this one carries less energy than the one from the night before. The tone is slower, more subdued, as if even the act of storytelling has been worn down by the day's effort. You listen for a moment, then let your attention drift. Your body feels heavy now. Not just tired, but weighed down in a way that makes even small movements seem unnecessary. You lean back further, letting your shoulders relax, your breathing slow. The stars begin to appear again. They feel familiar now, a quiet constant above a place that is anything but constant. You watch them for a while, then your thoughts begin to wander. To the food you ate, to the cost of supplies, to the small amount of gold you have found so far, the question of how long you can continue like this before something must change. There is no immediate answer, just a quiet uncertainty that settles beside you. Studies of life in the gold fields often highlight how quickly miners had to adapt not just to the physical demands, but to the economic and environmental challenges that shape daily survival. You feel that adaptation happening within you, slowly, reluctantly. You close your eyes for a moment, then open them again. The fire has burned lower. The voices around you have softened. One by one, people settle into their spaces, their movements slowing, their conversations fading into the background. You pull your blanket closer, adjusting it around your shoulders. The cold is returning. You lie down, feeling the uneven ground beneath you, the thin barrier between your body and the earth. It is not comfortable, but it is familiar now. Your breathing steadies. The aches remain, but they fade slightly as your body begins to rest. Somewhere nearby, the river continues its quiet flow, unchanged, unconcerned, and as you drift closer to sleep, you realize that this life is not defined by a single hardship, but by many small ones layered together, shaping each day in ways that are easy to overlook but impossible to escape. Night does not fully settle in all at once. It arrives in layers. First, the light fades from the hills, then the river loses its shine, and finally the camp itself softens into scattered points of firelight and shadow. You lie there for a while, watching the last traces of day disappear, feeling your body sink gradually into the ground beneath you. Sleep comes slowly, not because you are not tired, but because your mind resists letting go. It moves through the details of the day, replaying small moments, small decisions, as if there is something important hidden within them. Eventually, though, the weight of exhaustion takes over. And then at some point you cannot quite measure, you wake again. Not fully, just enough to notice the change. The camp is quieter now, but not silent. There are still voices, though fewer. Still movement, though slower. The fire near you has burned down to a soft glow, casting long shifting shadows that stretch and fade with each small flicker. You hear laughter. Not loud, not sharp, but loose in a way that feels different from the daytime conversations. It drifts from a nearby cluster of tents where light still burns brighter than the rest. Curiosity pulls at you. You shift slightly, propping yourself up just enough to see. A few men are gathered around a makeshift table, cards spread between them, coins stacked in uneven piles. One leans back, smiling broadly. Another watches carefully, his expression tight with concentration. A third pours something into small cups. You recognize the setup, even if you have not yet taken part. Gambling, a familiar part of human nature simply relocated to a new setting. Contemporary descriptions of mining camps frequently mention how quickly entertainment took root alongside labour. Saloons, card games, and drinking were common ways for miners to pass the time and escape the monotony of their work. You watch for a moment longer. The atmosphere is relaxed on the surface, but there is tension beneath it. Each card placed, each coin moved carries weight. Loss and gain happen quickly here, not in grains of gold, but in sudden shifts of fortune. A small and often overlooked detail is that some miners lost significant portions of their earnings through gambling, sometimes within a single evening. The promise of easy gain did not end at the river. It simply changed form. You lie back again considering that. It would be easy, you think, to walk over to sit down to try your luck in a different way. Easier perhaps than spending another full day in cold water chasing something that may or may not appear, but something holds you where you are. Perhaps caution. Perhaps fatigue, Or perhaps the quiet understanding that not all risks feel the same even if they lead to similar outcomes. You close your eyes again. The laughter continues for a while, then fades. The voices soften, the movements slow. One by one, the camp drifts closer to stillness. Eventually sleep returns, and when morning comes again, it feels less like a beginning and more like a continuation of something that never truly stopped. You sit up slowly, the now familiar stiffness greeting you once more. The air is cool, the ground firm beneath you, the sounds of the camp already beginning to rise. You take a breath, then another, and you stand. The routine calls you back to the river as it always does. But as you move through the camp, something else catches your attention. The remnants of the night's activity. A few scattered coins near the table, a cup left on its side, the faint smell of spilled drink lingering in the air. Signs of choices made in the dark hours, some perhaps regretted, others perhaps celebrated. You pause briefly looking at the scene, then you continue on. At the river, the light is soft again, the water reflecting the early sky in muted tones. You step into position, your claim still marked by the same line of stones unchanged for now. You kneel down, scoop, submerge, swirl. The rhythm returns immediately as if it had been waiting for you. But your mind is not entirely within it. It drifts back to the night before, to the cards, the coins, the laughter, to the idea that there are different ways to lose and different ways to win. Writers who examine personal accounts from this period often note how miners balanced work with moments of escape, seeking brief relief from the constant uncertainty. These moments, while temporary, played an important role in sustaining morale. You feel that tension now, the need to work, the desire to step away from it. You tilt the pan, nothing. You empty it and begin again. The repetition continues, but the awareness remains. This place does not only test your strength or your patience, it tests your choices, how you spend your time, how you manage what little you gain, how you respond to the opportunities and distractions that surround you. You dip the pan again, letting the water fill, letting the sediment settle. The river offers no guidance, only the same quiet challenge. And as you continue, you begin to understand that surviving here is not just about enduring the work, but about navigating everything that exists around it. Even in the hours when the work itself has stopped, the day moves forward with a quiet persistence that feels almost indifferent to how you are holding up. The river flows, the sun rises higher, and the rhythm resumes as if nothing has changed. Yet something has shifted inside you. You notice it in the way you look around more often. Not just at the water or the gravel in your pan, but at the people, their movements, their habits, the small ways they guard what is theirs. You begin to understand that gold is not the only thing at risk here. You straighten slightly, easing the tension in your back, and let your eyes drift across the nearby claims. A man a short distance away pauses mid-motion, glancing behind him before returning to his work. Another keeps a small sack tied close to his waist, checking it occasionally with a quick, almost unconscious touch. You feel the subtle caution that runs through the camp. It is not open fear, not constant suspicion, but something quieter. A steady awareness that what you have, however small, can be taken. Documented accounts from the gold fields often describe theft as a persistent concern. With little formal law enforcement and valuable materials easy to conceal, miners had to rely on their own vigilance to protect their belongings. You look down at your own tools, your pan, your small bundle, the few supplies you have left. None of it seems particularly valuable on its own, but here everything carries weight, even a tool, even a scrap of food. Food. Even a handful full of gold dust. You shift your position slightly, placing your belongings closer within reach. It is a small adjustment, but it brings a subtle sense of control. You return to your work. Scoop, submerge, swirl. Your hands move steadily, but your awareness remains divided. You listen more closely now. Footsteps behind you. Voices approaching, the sound of movement where there was none a moment before. It does not disrupt your rhythm, but it changes how you experience it. A faint sound reaches you, not loud, just enough to catch your attention. You glance over your shoulder. A man stands a short distance away, looking toward your claim. His expression is neutral, unreadable. He does not step forward, does not speak, just observes for a moment longer than feels comfortable. Then he turns away and walks on. You exhale quietly. Nothing happened, and yet something did. A minor but telling detail from this period is that miners often developed habits of sleeping lightly, waking easily at small sounds, and keeping their possessions close at all times. These behaviours were not born from constant danger, but from the possibility of it. You feel that possibility now. You dip your pan again. The water flows, the sediment shifts, but the simplicity of the task is no longer complete. It exists alongside a second layer of awareness, one that keeps you alert even as you focus. You tilt the pan, a few specks. You watch them settle, then carefully collect them, placing them into a small container. The act is precise, deliberate. Each particle matters not just because of its value, but because of what it represents. Your effort, your time, your presence here. You secure the container and place it within your belongings, keeping it close. You glance around again. The camp continues its quiet activity. No one appears openly threatening. No one moves with obvious intent toward anything that is not theirs. And yet the sense remains. This place requires attention. You sit back for a moment, stretching your legs, letting your eyes scan the wider area. The river bends gently ahead, disappearing from view behind a cluster of rocks and trees. Beyond that, more claims, more miners, more stories unfolding in parallel to your own. You wonder how many of them feel the same. How many are watching as closely as you are now? Historical observations suggest that while many disputes were resolved through informal agreements, tensions could rise quickly when resources were scarce or when trust broke down. In some cases, groups of miners formed committees to address theft or enforce rules, creating a kind of temporary order in an otherwise fluid environment. You imagine such a gathering, voices raised, accusations made, decisions reached without any higher authority to appeal to. It feels distant, but not impossible. You lean forward again and resume your work. Scoop, submerge, swirl. The repetition continues. Your body moves through the motions, your mind balancing between focus and awareness. The work itself remains unchanged, but the context around it feels more complex. You tilt the pan. Nothing this time. You empty it and begin again. The sun climbs higher, the light growing stronger, casting sharper shadows along the bank. The heat begins to build, not overwhelming, but noticeable, adding another layer to the day's demands. You wipe your forehead with the back of your hand, leaving a faint streak of dirt behind. You glance once more at your belongings, still there, untouched. For now, you return your attention to the river. Because despite everything, despite the caution, the awareness, the quiet tension that has settled into your thoughts, the purpose remains the same. To find gold, to hold on to it, to continue. You dip the pan again, steady and patient. Because in a place where nothing is guaranteed, even the act of holding on to what you have becomes part of the work. And you are learning slowly that survival here depends not just on what you gain, but on what you manage to keep. As the afternoon light stretches across the river, you begin to notice patterns that go beyond the work itself. Not just who is digging where or how much they might be finding, but who stands where in the quiet hierarchy of this place. It is subtle. It is subtle at first. A group of men working together slightly apart from the others. Their tools similar. Their movements coordinated, their conversation flowing in a shared language you do not fully understand. Nearby, another group works in a different cluster, equally close, equally connected, but separate. You realize that the camp is not as blended as it first appeared. It is layered. You continue your work, but your attention drifts outward. You notice how some miners are welcomed into certain spaces while others are not, how conversations open easily within some groups and remain closed to outsiders. It is not always hostile, but it is not always equal either. A well-documented reality of the gold rush is that foreign miners, particularly those from Latin America and China, often faced discrimination and were sometimes subjected to special taxes or restrictions. These measures varied by region and time, but they shaped the experience of many who came seeking the same opportunities as everyone else. You see a small example of this play out not far from you. A man approaches one of the clustered groups, speaking in careful, measured tones. His accent marks him as different, though his intent is clear. He gestures toward a nearby section of the river, perhaps asking to work there or to share space. The response is brief, not loud, not aggressive, but firm. The man hesitates, then nods slightly and steps away, moving toward a less crowded, less promising stretch of ground. You watch him halt. There is no confrontation, no raised voices, and yet the meaning is clear. A lesser-known aspect of this period is that some mining communities created informal boundaries that were not written down, but widely understood. These boundaries could determine who worked where and under what conditions, even without official enforcement. You shift slightly, feeling a quiet discomfort settle into your thoughts. You had not considered this before, that access itself might be uneven, that opportunity might depend not only on effort or luck, but on how others perceive you. You glance at your own position. Your claim remains undisturbed. Your space, at least for now, is accepted. But the scene you just witnessed lingers. You return to your pan, scoop, submerge, swirl. The motion continues steady as ever, but your mind carries a new awareness. The river may not judge, but the people around it do in ways both subtle and direct. You tilt the pan. A few specks. You collect them carefully, placing them with the others. Each small addition feels slightly heavier now, not just in value but in meaning. You sit back for a moment, letting your gaze move across the broader landscape. The hills rise gently in the distance, their surfaces marked by signs of digging and disturbance. Trees stand in scattered clusters, some untouched, others stripped away for firewood or construction. The land itself is changing, gradually, persistently. Environmental studies of the gold rush period often point out how mining activities altered riverbanks, disrupted soil, and reshaped local ecosystems. What begins as small-scale digging can over time transform entire areas. You notice it now in the details. The way the water runs slightly cloudier in certain places, the uneven edges of the bank where digging has taken place, the absence of vegetation in areas that might once have been covered. You run your hand through the gravel again, feeling its texture, its weight. This place is being worked, not gently, not carefully, but thoroughly. You resume your motion. Scoop, submerge, swirl. The repetition continues, yet the sense of the place deepens. It is no longer just a river with hidden gold. It is a space shaped by human effort, by competition, by decisions made daily and collectively, even when they are not spoken aloud. You glance again toward the man who was turned away earlier. He is working now farther down alone. His movements are steady, his posture focused. There is no outward sign of frustration, no visible reaction to what happened. But you wonder what he is thinking. Accounts from historians suggest that many miners who faced exclusion developed their own communities, working together in separate areas, creating parallel systems of support and cooperation. You imagine how that might feel, to arrive with the same hopes, to face different conditions, to continue anyway. You return your focus to your own claim, because for now this is where you stand. You tilt the pan. Nothing this time. You empty it and begin again. The sun begins its slow descent, the light softening slightly, casting longer shadows across the riverbank. The day is moving toward its end, though the work continues for as long as the light allows. You feel the weight of the hours in your body, but also something else. A growing awareness that this place is not simple. It is not just effort and reward. It is structure without clear rules. Opportunity shaped by invisible lines. A landscape that changes not only through nature but through the presence of those who come to claim it. You dip the pan again, steady and patient, because even as your understanding deepens, the work remains the same. And for now, that is what holds everything together. As the days pass, you begin to feel a quiet shift in what people around you are talking about. The river still holds attention, still draws most of the labour, but there is a growing sense that the surface has limits. You hear it in passing remarks, not as much as before. Picked over already, have to go deeper. The words repeat in different voices and different tones, but they carry the same idea. What was once easiest to reach is becoming harder to find. You feel that truth in your own work. The shallow layers yield less now, or perhaps they always did, and you're only just noticing. The small specks you collect require more effort, more patience, more time. The river gives, but it does so sparingly. You sit back for a moment watching as a group of miners a short distance away work in a different way. They are not crouched at the water's edge. They are digging deeper into the bank, into the earth itself. Their tools move with heavier motion, breaking through compact layers of soil and rock. The sound is different from the gentle swirl of pans, sharper, more forceful. You watch as one of them lifts a shovel full of dark material, carrying it to a separate area where another miner processes it through a wooden device. Water is poured through it, washing away lighter sediment, leaving behind heavier particles. It looks more efficient, but also more demanding. A widely accepted development during the gold rush is that miners gradually move from simple placer techniques to more intensive methods, including digging shafts and using equipment like sluice boxes to process larger amounts of material. You study their movements, coordinated, focused, repetitive in a different way. This is no longer just about kneeling at the river and hoping for a glint. This is structured labor, organized effort, a step closer to something that resembles industry rather than improvisation. You glance back at your own pan, light, simple, limited. You feel a quiet question rise. Is it time to change how you work? A lesser discussed observation is that as mining became more complex, it often required cooperation between miners. Digging deeper, managing water flow, and processing larger volumes of soil earth were tasks that could be difficult to handle alone. You look again at the group. They move as a unit, each person performing a role. One digs, one carries, one washes. Their efficiency comes not just from their tools, but from their coordination. You consider what it would mean to join something like that, to give up a portion of your independence in exchange for greater output, to trust others with your time, your effort, and whatever gold might be found. It is not a simple decision. You return your attention to your own claim. Scoop, submerge, swirl. The familiar rhythm feels almost fragile now, as if it belongs to an earlier stage of this place. Something simpler, something that may not last. You tilt the pan, a faint trace, less than before. You empty it and sit back, resting your hands on your knees. The difference is clear. The easy ground is fading. You stand slowly, stretching your back, and take a few steps closer to the group you have been watching. Not too close, not enough to intrude, but enough to observe more clearly. You notice the depth of the hole they are digging. It is not shallow. The walls are uneven, cut through layers of earth that vary in colour and texture. The deeper they go, the darker the soil becomes. You also notice something else. The edges. They are not stable. The earth looks compact but not solid. There are small cracks, slight shifts, subtle signs that the structure is not entirely secure. A detail often mentioned in accounts of early mining is that digging deeper into banks and hillsides introduced new risks, including cave-ins and falling debris. Without proper reinforcement, these excavations could become dangerous quickly. You step back slightly. The work may be more productive, but it is not safer. You watch as one of the miners pauses, looking up briefly before continuing. His movements are practiced, but there is a tension in them, a constant awareness of the space around him. You return to your claim, because for now it is what you know. You kneel down again, scoop, submerge, swirl. The motion continues, but your thoughts remain with what you have seen. The shift from surface to depth, from individual effort to coordinated work, from simplicity to something more complex. You tilt the pan, nothing. You empty it and begin again. The sun lowers slightly, the light softening as the afternoon begins to give way to evening. Shadows stretch longer across the ground, marking the slow passage of time. You feel the weight of the day in your body, but also the weight of the decision ahead, to continue as you are, or to change. Analysts of this period often highlight how many miners face this exact choice, balancing the familiarity of placer mining with the potential gains and risks of deep excavation. You sit back once more, letting your gaze move across the river, the camp, the distant hills. This place is evolving, quietly, persistently, and whether you realize it or not, you are part of that change. You dip the pan again, steady and deliberate, because for now the work continues, but beneath the surface something is shifting, and you can feel it. The change does not arrive as a single moment. It unfolds slowly, almost quietly, in the way the air feels against your skin, in the way the ground responds beneath your feet, in the way the sky holds its light. At first, it is just warmth, the kind that builds steadily as the sun climbs higher, pressing down more firmly than it did before. You notice it as you work a subtle shift from cool morning air to something heavier, something that lingers. You wipe your forehead with the back of your hand, leaving a faint trace of dust behind. The river still runs cold, but the contrast becomes sharper now. Your hands move between two extremes, heat above, cold below. It's not uncomfortable at first, but it becomes so over time. Climate records and first-hand accounts from the period describe how miners faced a wide range of weather conditions, from intense summer heat to sudden cold snaps depending on the region and season. These shifts added another layer of difficulty to an already demanding life. You feel that layer now. The sun does not simply shine, it weighs. You adjust your position slightly, trying to find a balance between shade and access to the water. There is little shade to be found. A few scattered trees, some casting narrow shadows that shift quickly as the day progresses. You step into one briefly, letting the cooler air settle around you. It helps, but not for long. You return to your claim. Scoop, submerge, swirl. The rhythm continues, though your movements are slower now, not from hesitation, but from the added effort required to maintain focus under the growing heat. Your throat feels dry. You reach for your water, taking a careful sip. Not too much. You have learned to measure everything here. Food, water, energy. You cap it again and set it aside. Nearby, a miner removes his hat, fanning himself briefly before returning to his work. Another moves more frequently between positions, as if unable to settle comfortably in one place. The heat affects everyone, but in different ways. A small but striking detail found in personal letters from miners is how often they mention the discomfort of dust during dry periods. As the ground hardened and movement increased, fine particles would rise into the air, settling on skin, clothing and lungs. You notice it now. A faint dryness in the air. A thin layer of dust clinging to your arms, mixing with sweat to form a film that feels both sticky and gritty. You brush at it absently. It returns. Immediately, you continue working. Scoop, submerge, swirl. The water offers temporary relief each time your hands dip beneath the surface. The cold cuts through the heat, sharp and immediate, but it fades quickly once you lift your hands again. You tilt the pan. A faint glint. You lean closer. It is small, but real. You collect it carefully, adding it to your growing, though still modest supply. You sit back for a moment, letting your body rest. The sun hangs high now, its light direct, unfiltered. The shadows are shorter, the contrast sharper. Everything feels more exposed. You glance toward the hills. They look different in this light. The textures more pronounced, the colours slightly washed by the brightness. You notice areas where the ground has been disturbed, where digging has altered the natural shape of the land. The environment here is not static. It responds, gradually but visibly. Environmental historians often emphasize how mining activities during the gold rush began to reshape landscapes, altering waterways and soil structures in ways that would have lasting effects. You run your hand through the gravel again, feeling its dryness where it lies above the waterline. This place is being worked hard, and it shows. You stand slowly, stretching your back, feeling the heat settle more fully into your body. Your shirt clings slightly, now damp with sweat. Your movements feel heavier, as if each action requires a bit more effort than it did in the morning. You take another small sip of water, careful, measured. You return to your position. Scoop, submerge, swirl. The repetition continues, though your focus shifts slightly. You begin to pace yourself more deliberately, allowing brief pauses between cycles, conserving energy rather than pushing through without rest. You watch others do the same. Some move into the shade when they can, others remove layers of clothing, adjusting to the temperature. A few continue at the same pace, determined to extract as much as possible before the day ends. Each person finds their own way to cope. You tilt the pan. Nothing. You empty it and begin again. The afternoon stretches on. The heat does not break. It settles into everything. Your skin, your clothes, the ground beneath you. Even the air feels thicker, as if it carries weight. You pause again, longer this time, letting your body recover. You look out across the river. It flows as it always has, unchanged. unaffected, at least on the surface. You wonder how long it can remain that way. A question that researchers continue to explore is how the balance between natural systems and human activity shifted during this period and how quickly those changes became noticeable. You feel that question in a more immediate sense, in the dust, in the altered banks, in the steady presence of people where once there may have been none. You kneel again, because despite everything, the work remains. Scoop, submerge, swirl. The motion continues steady and familiar even as the conditions around you shift. You tilt the pan, a faint trace. You collect it, and as the sun begins its slow descent, bringing with it the promise of cooler air, you realize that this place tests you not only through effort and uncertainty, but through endurance. The ability to continue, even when the environment itself seems to press against you. You dip the pan once more, because stopping is still not an option, and for now, endurance is what carries you forward. Evening arrives again, softer this time, almost as if the day itself has grown tired of pressing against you. The heat loosens its grip, the light stretches and thins, and a faint coolness returns to the air. You feel it immediately. Your shoulders drop a little. Your breathing slows. The tension that built quietly through the afternoon begins to ease, though it does not disappear entirely. You make your way back to camp with measured steps, your body moving more carefully now, conserving what energy remains. The ground feels familiar beneath your boots, every uneven patch and worn path already mapped in your mind. The fire you build tonight catches more easily. A small detail, but one that feels like progress. You sit beside it, letting the warmth rise gently. Not the harsh heat of the sun, but something steadier, more controlled. You hold your hands out, turning them slowly, feeling sensation return fully after hours in the river. Your thoughts drift. Not to the gold, not immediately, but to something farther away. Home. You do not picture it clearly at first, just fragments. A room, a street, a voice. Details that feel both close and distant at the same time, as if they belong to someone else's memory rather than your own. You close your eyes briefly, then open them again. The camp surrounds you, grounding you in the present. A recurring observation in letters from miners is how often they wrote about homesickness, especially after the first weeks or months had passed. The initial excitement gave way to a quieter longing, a sense of distance not just in miles but in experience. You feel that distance now. Not overwhelming, but present. You reach into your belongings and pull out a small item. Perhaps a letter, perhaps a photograph. Something that connects you to where you came from. You hold it for a moment, then carefully put it away. Around you, the camp moves through its evening routine. Fires glow, conversations rise and fall. Some speak of the day's findings, comparing small successes or shared frustrations. Others remain quiet, their attention turned inward. You listen without fully engaging. Someone nearby mentions a letter received from the east, carried across long distances by uncertain routes. Another speaks of news that may or may not be true, passed from one camp to another, changing slightly with each retelling. Communication here is slow, uncertain, and yet it matters deeply. An interesting detail preserved in correspondence from the period is how letters could take weeks or even months to arrive, and how the information within them was often already outdated by the time it was read. You imagine sending a message from here, trying to explain this place, the work, the uncertainty, the constant balance between hope and fatigue. Would it make sense to someone far away? You are not sure. You lean back slightly, letting the firelight flicker across your vision. The shadows shift gently, creating patterns that feel almost hypnotic. For a moment, the camp seems quieter. Then a voice nearby breaks the stillness. Two men are speaking, their tones low but focused. You catch fragments of their conversation. They are discussing a new area farther north, a place where, according to someone they trust, the gold is more abundant. The idea spreads quickly, not loudly, but steadily. A theme that appears frequently in accounts of the gold rush is the constant movement of miners from one location to another, driven by rumors of better prospects. Entire groups would sometimes relocate based on a single report chasing the possibility of greater success. You feel that pull, the suggestion that somewhere else might be easier, richer, more rewarding. You glance toward the darkness beyond the camp. It reveals nothing, just shapes and shadows, the suggestion of distance without detail. You return your attention to the fire, because leaving is not simple. It means giving up your claim, your small hard-earned place. It means starting again. You weigh that quietly, not as a decision to be made now, but as something that lingers at the edge of your thoughts. You shift your position, pulling your blanket closer around your shoulders as the air cools further. The warmth of the fire feels more pronounced now, more necessary. Your body begins to relax. The tension in your back softens. Your hands feel lighter. Your breathing deepens. You listen to the camp. The sounds are familiar now, predictable in their unpredictability. A laugh, a cough, the crackle of wood, the low murmur of voices fading in and out. You lie back slowly, your eyes drifting upward. The stars are clearer tonight, sharp points of light against a deep, quiet sky. You watch them for a while, letting your thoughts slow, letting the question settle without answers, because not everything here can be resolved. Not in a single day. Not even in many. You close your eyes briefly, then open them again. The fire has burned lower. The voices have softened. The camp is moving toward rest, and you feel yourself following. Not because everything is settled, but because your body, your mind, everything within you recognizes the need to pause, to recover, to prepare for whatever comes next. You turn slightly, adjusting your position, finding a space that feels just comfortable enough. The ground is still uneven, the blanket still thin, but it is enough. And as you let your eyes close once more, the thoughts of home, of rumors, of choices yet to be made drift gently into the background, leaving only the quiet presence of the night and the steady, patient rhythm of rest. Morning returns without ceremony as it always does, and you rise with the same steady awareness that has begun to define your days. There is less hesitation now, less questioning of what comes next. Your body seems to know before your thoughts fully catch up. You sit up, stretch slowly, and take in the camp around you. It feels both familiar and slightly altered, not because anything obvious has changed, but because your perception of it has deepened. You notice more now. Small differences, subtle shifts. The way some faces appear more tired than before, the way others carry a quiet energy that suggests something has gone well. You stand and move toward the river once more. The path feels routine, worn by repeated steps, not just yours, but those of countless others. The ground bears the marks of movement, of persistence, of people passing through with a purpose. At the river, the light is soft again, the water reflecting the pale tones of early morning. You take your place at your claim, the stones still marking your small territory. You kneel, scoop, submerge, swirl. The rhythm returns, but today something else draws your attention. A small gathering has formed a short distance away. Not large, not disruptive, but noticeable. You glance over between motions, watching as a man stands at the center, his posture relaxed in a way that feels different from the usual strain of work. He is speaking. You cannot hear every word, but you catch enough to understand. He has found something, more than a few specks, more than the usual modest return, a larger piece. Not enormous, not life-changing perhaps, but significant enough to draw attention. The people around him listen closely. Some lean in, others stand back, arms cross, their expressions a mix of interest and quiet skepticism. Stories like this are not new, but seeing one unfold in front of you feels different. Period accounts often highlight how news of a successful find could spread quickly through a camp, shaping morale and influencing decisions almost immediately. Even a modest discovery could renew hope for those who had been struggling. You feel that effect now, a subtle lift, a reminder that the effort can lead somewhere. At the same time, another thought follows close behind. If one person finds something, what about the others? You return your attention to your pan, scoop, submerge, swirl. Your movements are steady, but your mind is not entirely focused on the process. It drifts back to the man, to the small crowd, the idea of success, appearing suddenly after days or weeks of uncertainty. You tilt the pan, nothing. You empty it and begin again. The contrast is clear. For every story of success, there are many more of quiet persistence without reward. You glance again toward the gathering. It has begun to disperse. The moment has passed. The man with the find has moved on, perhaps to secure what he has gained, perhaps to continue working. The others return to their own tasks. The river resumes its sail. A lesser noted aspect of these moments is how they could create both inspiration and tension. While some miners felt encouraged by another's success, Others grew more anxious, wondering if they were missing something or if their own efforts were misplaced. You feel both responses at once, hope and doubt. You shift slightly, adjusting your position and continue working. Scoop, submerge, swirl. The repetition grounds you again. Your hands move with practiced ease, now your attention narrowing once more to the details within the pan. The water carries away the lighter material. The heavier sediment settles. You tilt the pan. A faint glint. You lean closer. Small, but there. You collect it carefully, adding it to your supply. It's not comparable to what the other man found, but it is something, and something matters. You sit back for a moment, letting that small success settle into your awareness. Around you, the work continues. No one else seems particularly focused on your find, just as you had not been focused on theirs until the moment it drew attention. Each person here moves within their own experience, connected but separate. Writings from observers of the gold rush often emphasize how individual stories varied widely even within the same camp. Some struck gold quickly, others labored for months with little to show. Many fell somewhere in between. You feel yourself settling into that middle space. Not failing, not thriving, just continuing. You stand briefly, stretching your back, letting your eyes scan the wider area. The river bends as it always has. The hills stand unchanged in the distance. The camp hums with the same layered activity. And yet each day adds something new. A new story. A new observation. A new question. You kneel again. Scoop, submerge, swirl. The rhythm continues. But now it carries a different weight. Not just the effort of the work, but the awareness of what that work might lead. Or not. You tilt the pan. Nothing this time. You empty it and begin again. The sun rises higher, the light strengthening, the shadows shortening. The day moves forward, and you move with it. Because in a place where outcomes can change quickly and without warning, the only constant you can rely on is the act of continuing. One pan at a time. One small moment at a time. Until something shifts, or until you do. As the days continue to layer themselves one upon another, your awareness begins to stretch beyond the immediate rhythm of your work. At first, everything here felt focused on the pan, the river, the next small possibility of gold. But now slowly the edges of that focus widen. You begin to see the land differently. Not as a fixed backdrop, but as something changing. You notice it in the river first. The water is not always as clear as it once seemed. In some places it carries a faint cloudiness, a subtle shift that becomes more visible when the light catches it just right. You watch as sediment drifts downstream, stirred up by digging, by shoveling, by the constant movement of earth. You kneel at your claim and dip your hands into the current. It feels the same, cold, steady, but it does not look quite the same. Environmental records from the gold rush era indicate that mining activities often increase sediment in rivers, altering water clarity and affecting the flow in subtle but noticeable ways. You lift your hands and let the water run off. It is a small change, but it is there. You return to your pan, scoop, submerge, swirl. The motion continues, but your thoughts drift outward again. You look toward the bank. The edges are no longer smooth. Where once there may have been gentle slopes, there are now cuts, uneven lines where earth has been removed. Small sections appear worn down their shapes, altered by repeated digging. You remember the earlier collapse you witnessed. It makes more sense now. The ground is being reshaped constantly. A detail sometimes overlooked in broader discussions is how quickly these visible changes could occur, especially in heavily worked areas. What might have taken years to shift naturally could be altered in weeks through concentrated human effort. You run your fingers through the gravel again. It feels dry where it lies above the waterline, loose and disturbed. This is not untouched land. It has been worked, turned over, sifted, and left in a different state than before. You stand slowly, stretching your back, and look farther out. The hills show signs as well, not everywhere, but in patches, areas where vegetation has thinned, where the colour of the soil shows through more clearly, where paths have formed from repeated movement cutting through what might once have been continuous growth. You imagine what this place looked like before. Quieter, less crowded, less disturbed. Then you look at it now, active, altered, marked by effort. Scholars examining environmental impact often note that the gold rush was one of the earliest large-scale events in California to significantly reshape natural landscapes, leaving lasting changes that extended beyond the immediate search for gold. You feel that idea settle into you. This place is not just affecting you. You are affecting it, along with everyone else here. You return to your claim and kneel again. Scoop, submerge, swirl. The rhythm continues, but it feels different now. More connected. Each motion, each handful of gravel is part of something larger than your individual effort. It contributes to the slow transformation of the riverbank, the shifting of sediment, the change in how water moves and land holds together. You tilt the pan. A faint trace. You collect it carefully. The small gold flecks sit in your container, their colour unchanged, their presence steady. Gold does not alter, but everything around it does. You sit back for a moment, letting your gaze move across the wider scene. Miners working in different ways, some at the water's edge like you, others digging deeper into the banks, still others moving materials through wooden structures, washing larger amounts of earth at once. Each method leaves its mark. Each effort adds to the overall change. You notice how certain areas appear more worn than others, their surfaces stripped down, their shapes irregular. The land bears the signs of repeated use of persistence of people returning again and again to the same spots. You take a slow breath. There is something both impressive and unsettling about it. The scale, the accumulation, the way small actions repeated over time create visible transformation. You glance at your own hands, covered in fine dust, marked by small abrasions. They are part of this process. You return to your pan. Scoop, submerge, swirl. The repetition continues, but your awareness remains expanded. You tilt the pan. Nothing. You empty it and begin again. The sun moves across the sky, the light shifting, gradually casting different angles across the ground. Shadows stretch and contract, marking time in a way that feels almost detached from your work. You look once more at the river. It flows as it always has, but not exactly as it once did. And you begin to understand that while you came here to take something from the land, something from the river, the exchange is not one-sided. The land changes, the water changes, and in quieter ways so do you. You dip the pan again, steady and patient, because even as the larger picture becomes clearer, the work itself remains the same. One pan, one motion, one moment at a time. The question arrives quietly, almost as if it has been waiting for the right moment. You do not hear it spoken aloud. No one asks you directly, and yet it settles into your thoughts with a clarity that is difficult to ignore. How long will you stay? You notice it first in the way your movements slow, not from fatigue alone, but from reflection. Each pan you lift feels connected not only to the present moment, but to everything that has come before it, and everything that might follow. You kneel at your claim. Scoop, submerge, swirl. The rhythm continues, but your mind drifts. You think about the days behind you. The first arrival, the uncertainty, the small successes, the growing awareness of what this place demands. And then you think about what lies ahead. More of the same, or something different. Personal journals from the gold rush frequently describe this turning point when miners began to weigh their options more seriously. Some chose to continue hoping that persistence would eventually lead to greater reward. Others decided to leave, either returning home or seeking new opportunities elsewhere. You feel that decision forming now, not urgent, but present. You tilt the pan, a faint trace. You collect it carefully, placing it with the others. Your supply has grown, slowly, not dramatically, but enough to measure. You consider its weight, not just in gold, but in effort, in time, in everything you have given to gather it. A small, somewhat ironic detail preserved in anecdotal accounts is that some miners spent more on supplies, travel, and daily living than the value of the gold they managed to collect, leaving them with little or nothing to show for their time. You think about your own situation, the food you have purchased, the tools, the small comforts. The cost adds up. You stand slowly stretching your back and look out across the river. The camp is active as always. Some miners work with the same steady focus. Others move with a different energy, packing belongings, adjusting equipment, preparing for change. You watch one man dismantle his small shelter, folding fabric, carefully stacking what little he owns. Another speaks with a merchant exchanging items, perhaps preparing for departure. The signs are subtle, but they are there. People leave, people arrive. The cycle continues. Writers who examine migration patterns during the gold rush often highlight how fluid the population was, with individuals constantly moving in response to opportunity, rumor, or necessity. You feel that fluidity now, not as an abstract new, but as a choice in front of you. You return your attention to your claim. Scoop, submerge, swirl. The motion continues steady and familiar, but it feels different. Not just work, but evaluation. You tilt the pan. Nothing. You empty it and sit back. The question returns. Stay or leave. Neither option feels simple. Staying means continuing this life. The repetition, the uncertainty, the slow accumulation that may or may not lead anywhere significant. Leaving means stepping away from the possibility. The chance, however small, that something might change if you just give it more time. You look down at your hands. They have changed. Rougher, stronger in some ways, more worn in others. You think about your body, the fatigue that settles more quickly now, the small aches that linger longer. You think about your mind, more aware, more cautious, less easily carried by simple hope. A topic that continues to interest researchers is how individuals balanced optimism and realism in environments like this, where outcomes were unpredictable and effort did not always correlate with reward. You feel that balance shifting within you. Hope is still there, but it is quieter now, more measured. You stand again and take a few steps away from the river, looking back at your claim from a short distance. It looks small, insignificant in the larger landscape, and yet it has been your world for days now. You return and kneel. Kneel once more. Scoop, submerge, swirl. The rhythm continues, because the decision is not made yet. Not fully. You tilt the pan. A faint glint. You lean closer. Small, but real. You collect it carefully, and as you do, you realize that this is what makes the decision difficult. The possibility, even in its smaller form. You sit back holding the moment for just a second longer. Then you place the gold with the rest. The sun begins its slow descent. The light softens. The shadows stretch. And the question remains, not pressing, not urgent, but steady, waiting, just like everything else here. The final evening settles over you more gently than the ones before, as if the land itself has grown quieter. Or perhaps you have learned how to meet it in stillness. You sit beside your fire, the familiar warmth rising in soft waves. No longer something you chase, but something you receive without effort. The river continues its steady motion in the distance, a constant presence that no longer demands your attention in the same way. You listen to it without listening. You feel it without watching. Your body carries the memory of every movement you've repeated here. The weight of the pan in your hands, the cold of the water, the strain in your back. All of it remains, but softened now, as if time has taken the sharper edges and rounded them into something quieter. You look down at your hands. They tell a story, not in words, but in texture, in small marks, in the way they move more slowly now, not from weakness, but from familiarity. You know what this place has asked of you, and what it has given. A grounded conclusion often drawn by historians is that for most miners, the gold rush was not a story of sudden wealth, but one of endurance, adaptation, and modest outcomes shaped by effort and circumstance. You feel that truth in a way that does not require explanation. You reach for your small container of gold and open it carefully. Inside, the tiny flecks catch the firelight. They are not impressive, not in the way you once imagined, but they are real. Each one represents a moment, a motion. A choice to continue when stopping would have been easier. You close the container and set it aside, not with disappointment, not with pride, just with acceptance. A small lesser-known reflection from personal accounts of the time is that many miners spoke not only of what they found, but of how the experience itself changed them, shaping their expectations and their understanding of effort and reward. You sit quietly, letting that idea settle. You think about the river. The way it flowed before you arrived, the way it will continue long after you leave. You think about the land, the marks left by your work and the work of others, the subtle changes that will remain even when the camp is gone. And then you think about yourself, how you arrived with one set of expectations, And now sit here with another. You lean back slightly, letting your gaze drift upward. The sky's clear. Clear. The stars steady. They feel familiar now, as if they've been watching over each of your days without interruption. You breathe in slowly, then out. Your thoughts begin to slow. The questions that once felt urgent no longer press as strongly. The need to decide to act to move forward softens into something more gentle. There is no rush here, not in this moment. You let your shoulders relax, your body settling more fully into the ground beneath you. The uneven surface no longer feels uncomfortable, it simply is. You listen to the quiet sounds of the camp, fewer voices tonight, softer movements, a sense that the day has reached its natural end. Somewhere nearby a fire crackles faintly, another fades into embers. The world narrows slightly, not in a limiting way, but in a calming one. You close your eyes briefly, then open them again. The firelight flickers at the edge of your vision. The river continues, the stars remain, and slowly your awareness begins to drift inward. You notice your breathing, steady, unforced. You notice the weight of your body, supported, at rest. The memories of the days here move through your mind not as sharp images, but as soft impressions. The cold water, the quiet glints of gold, the voices in the camp, the shifting light across the river, all of it blending together. You do not need to hold on to any of it. You do not need to solve anything. You simply let it pass. Your breathing slows further. The space between each breath grows slightly longer, slightly deeper. The tension you carried begins to dissolve, not all at once, but gently. As if it's being carried away the same way the river carries sediment downstream. You feel yourself settling, not just physically, but mentally, emotionally, everything easing into a quieter state. The fire dim. The sounds fade, the night deepens, and you allow yourself to rest within it. No urgency, no expectation, just the steady presence of the moment. And as your awareness softens further, drifting closer to sleep, the final thought that remains is not about goal or effort or decision. It is simply this: you were here, and that's enough. The fire now is only a faint glow, barely illuminating the ground around you. The river, though still present, feels distant, its sound blending into the quiet rhythm of the night. Your body rests more deeply with each passing moment, the weight of the day dissolving into the earth beneath you. Your breathing becomes slower, softer, each inhale gentle, each exhale releasing what remains of tension. The thoughts that once moved quickly now drift like slow clouds, forming and fading without urgency. There is no need to follow them, no need to hold on to them. You are simply here, safe, still, at rest. The air cools slightly, brushing against your skin in a way that feels calm rather than sharp. The blanket rests lightly over you, just enough to hold warmth, just enough to remind you of comfort. The stars above remain steady, though you no longer need to see them to feel their presence. The vastness they represent becomes something quiet, something peaceful. Time loosens. Moments stretch gently. Nothing's required of you now. No work, no decisions, no effort, only rest. The river continues its endless path, but you do not need to follow it. The camp remains around you, but it no longer asks for your attention. Everything is as it should be, and as your awareness fades further, slipping softly into sleep, you carry with you only the calm, the stillness, the quiet understanding that this moment is enough. Sweet dream.